Hey folks, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. We got another fantastic show today with Martin and Pete. So we're doing an album wars, which is similar to what we've done before, where we're picking two albums that they have a lot in common. There's a similarity between the two of them, and then we're discussing those similarities and then what we prefer out of the two records. So again, to help me in that endeavor, we've got Mr. Pete Pardo and we've got Mr. Martin Popoff. How are you gentlemen doing this evening?
Yeah, doing all right.
Heck.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
All right.
So I just want to say hello to a few early birds that showed up. We got Webb Van Diver, who's watching two shows at once. So thanks for that effort. Much appreciated. We got Monkey House. Thanks for being here. Den Skill Music, how you doing? Guitar Talk Universe, how are you? The Dark Wizard, Tyler Patterson. Cool. So everybody's starting to fill in. We got Ken White just showed up. Captain Beyond. Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Much appreciated. Alrighty. So, yeah. So, I mean, all of us picked two records that have some similarities. There's some common ground between the two, and we're going to discuss that and then which one we prefer. So, I don't know. I guess we'll go Pete. We'll go one around because only three times around. So we'll go Pete and then we'll go Martin. So, Pete, what's your first couple albums there?
All right. Well, the cool thing about doing something like this is there are so many potential combinations, and
yes,
sometimes it's really easy to like pick bands and albums that we've talked about a million times. So I tried to go a little bit deeper here today. Well, maybe not so much with my first selections here, but I think they're very connected for a reason. So I chose two very notable guitar players who left the kind of big band that they were in to go and do their own thing. And let's take a look and see how these two new bands that they started stack up with each other.
How they made out, yeah.
The first one, guy's name is Richie Blackmore. Perhaps some of you have heard about him, right? He played in that band called Deep Purple, right? Something like that.
Purple.
Yeah. So he gets together with the band Elf and puts together the first Richie Blackmore's Rainbow album here. Again, Ronnie James Dio on vocals. The rest of the Elf band, minus the guitar player, forms the original lineup of Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. Pretty strong debut. Maybe not quite the album that the next two that would come after it, right, with different lineups and what have you. But it's got Man on a Silver Mountain on here, which is a top 10 Rainbow song. It's got Black Sheep of the Family, Self-Portrait, The Gorgeous, Catch the Rainbow. It's got, if you don't like rock and roll, it's kind of the boogie track on here, 16th Century Greensleeve, Snake Charmer, Temple of the King, right? Still I'm Sad, cover track of the Yardbird song. Strong debut. The other guitar player was in a little British band called UFO. He splits after a handful of albums. Michael Schenker is the guy's name. The Michael Schenker Group is the debut solo record, his new band, featuring, some studio guys, Simon Phillips on drums, a brand new singer called Gary Barden. And it's a all-out guitar fest and great stuff on here. Armed and Ready, Cry for the Nation, Victim Illusion. Lost Horizons, one of my favorite songs here. You got the great instrumental Into the Arena. Feels Like a Good Thing, another killer track. It's probably a little more metal than I would say this is, maybe the heavier album of the two. I guess it depends. It's interesting. I've been thinking about these two. This is like the hardest one, I think, out of the three that I have, because I like both of these for different reasons. And I'm like, all right, so who's got the better singer? Well, that's undeniably this one right here.
Yeah.
Which has the better guitar playing? It depends on who you like, right? Because Blackmore and Schenker, two of my favorite guys of all time. Which has more songs that I really love, right? I would argue that I don't know if anything on here can match like Man on a Silver Mountain. But I find this is stronger start to finish. And I think there's more on this album that there's really no skippable stuff on here. Whereas on the Rainbow album, there's probably a couple tracks that like don't really do a hell of a lot for me, even though there's stuff on here that's absolutely legendary. So I've been going back and forth with this all day. This is driving me crazy. I'm gonna go with the Schenker album, I think, as with a very, very slight nod, because to me, I don't know, Armed and Ready, Cry for the Nations, Victim of Illusion feels like a good thing. Into the Arena, even Looking Out from Nowhere is great. And then I love Lost Horizons. I'm curious to see your guys' thoughts on this, because it's almost like it's sacrilege to pick against a Blackmore Rainbow album, especially with Dio on it. But I think if this was Rainbow Rising or Long Live Rock and Roll, it'd be a question. But I think I'm going to give the nod to this one just by a little bit.
Nice.
Which one do you prefer, Martin?
I think I'm going to go with the Schenker. I find one thing that they have in common is they both sound like the work of a band who hasn't gone out and routine this material. So neither of them sound particularly like a band album. So they're a little stiff, a little sterile. And I'm definitely not a fan of, I'd say, 4.5 songs on the Rainbow album. So and I love the Schenker album. It's beautifully put together. I agree that the songs are much better as well. So yeah, definitely I get a lot more joy out of the Schenker album.
Yeah, if you put them back to back, song for song, Schenker's got to win. I think overall, it's just a better record. I mean, some of those tracks, like, the instrumental, I mean, he still plays that to this day. Like that's one of his main things, Into the Arena, right? Yeah, I got to go Schenker on that 100%. Yeah,
it's close, but yeah, they're both great. But I don't know. I find these days I reach for the Schenker way more than the Rainbow, even though there's a couple classic tracks on that Rainbow, right? And like I said, I think you can make the argument the Man on the Silver Mountain is the best song on either. And I love Catch the Rainbow. Self Portrait is great. Temple of the King is great. The rest of it's really good, but I don't know.
The Schenker almost sounds like more of a, I don't know, like at the time, like more of a modern metal record, really. You know?
Yeah,
it's got the Euro, and it's got that vibe, and I think it's better. Yeah. Alrighty, what do you got for the first album war, Martin?
Well, I've got Led Zeppelin. I'll give it away what both of them are. So we got Led Zeppelin, and we've got Jeff Beck, Truth. This is my double album version of this, because I've been doing this contrarian series called Who Invented Heavy Metal, and so I've had both on the brain because this one gets an official entry, and I probably disparaged this a little on that show, and I want to disparage it a little more because I think it just falls behind in the dust big time. I'm like, stop it with the Jeff Beck Truth is the blueprint to Led Zeppelin stuff. I can't stand it, right? Because I think it's just a very, very pale imitation of it. Granted, it came out in August 68. Led Zeppelin came out in January 69. The whole idea here is that we're trying to figure out how to move beyond the British blues boom and make some exciting new kind of music. And I think Led Zeppelin definitely achieves that much more, although it's not super, super modern sounding. It's not Black Sabbath, but the Jeff Beck, you've got a Yardbirds cover to kick off, and you've got kind of like a cream-like an original Let Me Love You. You got Morning Dew as a cover, You Shook Me as a cover, crappy piano version of it, Old Man River, kettle drums, 60s pop. You got Green Sleeves where they're actually playing Green Sleeves. It's not even 16th century Green Sleeves like our hero's Rainbow. You got Rock My Plimsoll, blues, not even that heavy. Beck's Bolero, who cares? Blues Deluxe, who cares? Crap blues, although it's an original. And you've got I Ain't Superstitious, a cover, snooze. So yeah, this is a way, way better album. I don't like when people say, oh, Jeff Beck did the whole thing. Jeff Beck did the Led Zeppelin album already with Truth. It's like very, very dim light bulb version of this, because on the Zeppelin, you've got Communication Breakdown for that, pre-paranoid heavy metal thing. You've got much more insistent, cool Blues Boom Moving On with Dazed and Confused and How Many More Time. You've got Good Times, Bad Times, which is a modern rock song without much blues in it. You get better acoustic stuff as well. So yeah. I think there's no comparison. I'm going with the Zeppelin.
Pete?
I mean, I would take the Zeppelin as well, but I love the Truth album. I think they're different enough. They're similar enough. I think that the problem is you had both Jeff Beck and Page were kind of coming from the same place. So I don't necessarily, I never really thought that, well, Zeppelin copied what Jeff and the boys were doing on the Truth album. I mean, it wasn't that far apart. I just think that both guys, coming out of the Yardbirds, I think they both had similar ideas to what they wanted to do. But I agree with Martin. I think there's enough like different sort of things on that first Zeppelin album that deviate from the standard kind of blues rock framework. They're both great for what they are. I mean, I think like Rod Stewart is a revelation on that Jeff Beck album, and Jeff's playing is amazing on that album. Whether you like some of the songs or not. But yeah, I would give the nod to Zeppelin by a bit on that one.
I would have to go Zeppelin 100%. I mean, yeah, they're cut from the same cloth and all that, but that Zeppelin record, it seemed like a very kind of well thought out, focused. This is what I'm gonna do, kind of thing. It's like you had a plan, right? And the musicianship and everything else. I mean, I can't go on. I'm not saying anything that nobody knows. I mean, yeah, that record. I mean, when we did our Zeppelin ranking, I think that was my number one. So,
wow,
yeah, I gotta go Zeppelin on that, 100%. Yeah.
Nice.
Alrighty, so I'm going kind of a little bit different. I compared these two records, Journey Escape and Foreigner 4, because it came out the same year and they were both massive records. 1981, summer of 1981, that's all you heard on the radio. It was either one or the other. The REO Speedwagon 2, High Infidelity, that was kind of that was almost going to be one of the ones I was going to pair it with, but I thought these were a little bit closer. I mean, these were all over the radio. Escape, 10 million records sold. Foreigner sold 7 million. They both had a lot of radio hits. Foreigner 4, you had Urgent, Waiting for a Girl Like You, which, by the way, I found out recently that the synth intro to that song was done by Thomas Dolby, because nobody could come up with a decent synth part, and he did. You got Jukebox Hero. But for Journey, man, you had, Don't Stop Believing, which if I never hear that song again, I'll be okay. Open Arms, the ballad, Who's Crying Now, both rode the charts, both were radio friendly. And they were the kind of rode that fence between radio friendly and they had some rockers in there. Both had great deep cuts, but the Journey record, I mean, Stone in Love, Keep on Running, Escape the Title Cut, Lay It Down, Mother Father. I mean, just absolutely amazing tracks. Foreigner, yeah, you had Nightlife was okay, a little, Luann, which is cheesy, but I like it. I'm Gonna Win, Slow and Heavy, but man, I prefer Escape 100%. And, Escape, there was keyboards in it, but it was piano. Whereas with the Foreigner, when they did the keyboards, they did the whole synth thing. And, I mean, I just got two words, Neil Sean. He absolutely shone. There you go. On that record.
Neil Sean shines.
Neil Sean shines. Just unfreaking believable. I mean, Stone in Love alone. I mean, he's got the solo and then he's got that tag out. That's just, I mean, is there anything better than listening to that guy play guitar? Like, holy shit. I mean, Mick Jones he's a great player too. I'm not, denying that, but man, I mean, come on. Who can compete with Neil Sean? And the whole record is great. It's just, it just got a lot more meat to it. To me, it's got better songs overall. It's just, you can't really deny Escape. It's just a phenomenal record. It's almost, I think it did a thing with you, Pete, a long time ago where I said it was a perfect album. And man, what a phenomenal record. What a phenomenal record that is. What's your pick, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I would go with the Journey album. And I liked Foreigner 4, but it's not like one of my favorite Foreigner albums. Not that Escape is one of my favorite Journey albums either, but it's a great album. I would agree. Neil Sean is like probably, and there's a million guitar players out there, but I don't know if there's anybody who has the ability to create more memorable, hummable guitar solos than Neil Sean. I mean, he's got amazing chops. He's one of the absolute, he can shred, he can do all that stuff, but man, like almost just think about like every guitar solo. You can sit and like hum to every one of his guitars, no matter what album.
Yeah, they pop into your head immediately. He's in my top 10 guitar players of all time. I always loved.
He's like one of those guys that should be in mine as well. And like when I really like talk about him, I'm like, yeah, he's like one of my all-time favorites. But then like when I actually go and do an all-time favorite list, he doesn't wind up in the top 10. But I'm like, I always like hit myself. I'm like, why did you forget him? Because he's amazing. I will say I never ever have to hear the ballad ever again. I'm not an open arms fan at all. But Don't Stop Believing. I've heard it 1,000,001 times. I still don't mind it. The rest of the album is just some great rockers on it, and it's just and the Foreigner album's really good too. But yeah, I'll take Journey every day in this one.
I mean, Stone in Love and Mother Father, just holy shit. And Escape, the title cut is just unfrickable. And it's funny because of that's their sort of radio friendly record, but Escape, you still get a little bit of taste of that, where they came from. It's got a little bit of that jazz, sort of that fusiony thing happening there. Right.
Yeah. And Perry's amazing on it. I mean, he's so good on
it. God, what a voice, man. Yeah. Martin?
Well, I'll disagree with you guys because the way Geddy Lee's voice disqualifies Rush for a lot of people. I'm almost at that point with Steve Perry. I find his voice kind of like a distracting novelty. And I've never liked their production very much. And I can't get out of my head all the dirty laundry that goes on in that band, but there's a lot of dirty laundry in Foreigner too. But, and I'll go with Pete. I'll agree with Pete that, the Foreigner loses steam for me because this is not one of my favorite Foreigner albums. It's at least fourth, if not more. Right. I just like that weird, I wouldn't even call it chemistry because again, dirty laundry, but that sort of, the personality that we get out of Lou Gramm and the weird sort of small playing in a matchbox, held back, strange heaviness of Mick Jones, and just those songs. And I think there's more variety. I think there's more dynamics. I never liked Journey's kind of distorted, strange, echoey production values either. Just never been much of a Journey guy. I mean, I had my one time for a few months there where I learned everything and knew everything and was loving everything, and then it faded and I kind of never went back. And Foreigner's just gone, kind of slowly up and up and up over the years for me, kind of thing. So I'll go with Foreigner.
All right. Okay. All right. What are your next two, Pete?
All right. So let's pick two additional guitar players, right? Can you sense the theme here? Although I'll break away from the theme on my last two. So two notable players, both kind of came into prominence, living in the shadow of one of the greatest of all time who is no longer with us. And throughout the years, both guys have been kind of like called like a copycat of the guy who's no longer with us. And we've got Robin Trower live album right there, classic live album. And the other guy, of course, is Frank Marino and his classic live album. So both are amazing, amazing live records. I could have picked studio albums, but it's like the live albums. I think it was where I really wanted to go here. And in both instances, these were the first albums I got from either guy. It's not good when the first thing you get from a band or an artist is the live album, because then, of course, you stack everything up after it, all the studio versions up against those great live tracks. And these live albums are terrific. So, the Trower, and they're a little bit different because I think the Marino is a little bit more aggressive, a little bit heavier than the Trower stuff. The Trower stuff is more kind of funky, psychedelic, whereas the and bluesy, obviously, and the Marino is more like kind of like hard rock, bluesy hard rock type of thing. But, the Trower's got Two Rolling Stone, which is one of my favorite Trower songs on it. It's got a great version of Daydream. It's got Rock Me Baby, Lady Love, I Can't Wait Much Longer, Alethea, and a little bit of Sympathy. And they're all some of his best songs from those early albums. What is it missing? In both instances of both of these albums, they should have been a double because they're missing some of the key songs from the early catalog. There's no, the main track, the Bridge of Sighs is not on here. It doesn't have Day of the Eagle on here, both of which were played live on this tour. Very strange they decided to leave it off. And then over on the Frank Marino, you've got like a bunch of covers like they do I'm a King Bee. They do Johnny Be Good, which is amazing on here.
Amazing. Yeah.
Purple Haze is amazing on here. And then you got stuff like, Talking About a Feeling, which is great. A new rock and roll. I'm a King. Dragonfly is terrific on here. Probably the definitive version on it. This one probably has the more explosive guitar playing on it. And I love Marino a lot. He's like one of the greatest of all time. But I'm going to give the nod to Trower because this was like such an important album for me when I got it. It was like my first Guitar Hero and like the first album where I bought, after Kiss, where I was kind of like, I want to play guitar from listening to this dude. And it just inspired me to no end. And I still listen to this day, and it sends like, goosebumps up the back of my neck and stuff like that. Just great. Two great albums. You can't go wrong with either one, but I'm going to go with Trower on this one by ever so slightly.
All right. Martin, what's your pick between those two?
Yeah, I'll go with the Trower. I just really do not want to hear anybody do covers live or studio, and that's just like way too many covers for me on, and not imaginative choices either on the Frank Marino. I don't think the production's very good on that either. And Trower, I've joked with Pete a couple times. It's like every time I put Robin Trower on, I go, I could just listen to Robin Trower for the rest of my life. Like, why do I not spend hours and hours and hours with this guy? Because it just sounds like they're on such a cool mission. It just sounds it's got so much gravitas and regality to it, right? So yeah, just something about the whole Robin Trower mystique of that band put together and those great vocals and everything. It just feels like those guys have just carved out this super interesting persona. And even though like the big hits aren't on that, still I think I just love the mystique and the package and just the world that Robin Trower creates.
All right. Well, this time I'm going to be the contrarian. I'm going Frank Marino.
There you go. That's cool. Yeah.
Holy shit. King B. I mean, John, he just takes those songs and yeah, okay, they're covers, but I mean, they don't sound anything like the original. He blows them up to high heaven. He takes them everywhere they could possibly go. And just the fluidity of his playing and the imagination and just the wealth of, he's got such a deep well of things he throws in there, like his vocabulary is infinite, and I love friggin' Frank Marino, man. Amazing guitar player. Yeah, I got to go Frank on that one. All righty. What do you got next, Martin?
Well, next I've got Angel Witch and Iron Maiden, the debut. And I like talking about these two albums together because I like this concept of where occasionally you get these bands where one band's going to become absolutely massive and the other one's going to fade into obscurity, but for a brief moment there, for a brief magical moment, one of them actually seemed more professional and more hopeful and like they were going to take off than the other one. And I think Angel Witch in this case made the better debut album. They're on Bronze Records and Iron Maiden's on EMI, but I think they even get better production values on it. I think there was even a cooler version of Hype because Maiden had the Soundhouse tapes, but with this you had like, those transgressive Baphomet, 7-inch singles. You got Sweet Danger and Flight 19. There was all this cool mystique around this band. And then they put out this walloping Sabbathy, scary, amazingly huge riffs, super professional, one of the greatest new wave of British heavy metal albums, maybe even the best one. A lot of variety, sounded like just almost like a stadium rock band, the way there's so much cool variety and speeds and dynamics on this album, but mostly just super heavy, really good stuff like Angel of Death on here, Atlantis, Confused. They did put Sweet Danger on here, but even more kind of melodic, catchy stuff like Angel Witch itself and White Witch. But of course, they never put out another album until 1985, and by that point, it's just Kevin and the drummer, Dave Hogg. They get a lead singer. Production values aren't that good. They've fallen off of Bronze. Screaming and Bleeding just isn't that good. And Frontal Assault or Full Frontal Assault, whatever it's called, also was not that good. They're an amazing band now. They've redeemed themselves in the modern day. And of course, I just remember hearing the rumors all the time that they weren't particularly good live, but I mean, they were a trio on this, right? The great Kevin Riddles on bass. But Maiden had 5 guys and the firepower and the ambition and the past, and they just kept slamming out albums 81, 82, 83, 84. They just took off like a rocket, and Angel Witch fizzled. But I totally remember back in the day, for that brief instance in 1980, it's like Angel Witch is the real front runner here, and Iron Maiden, yeah, it's kind of fun, kind of punky, kind of thin sounding. They're good, but these guys had put out a masterpiece, and then it all fell apart for one, and one became the second biggest heavy metal band of all time.
All right, between the two, Pete, what's your pick?
Oof. This is a tough one. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, all right, well, everything in me screams you have to pick Iron Maiden here. Then I'm thinking, man, that debut Angel Witch album is an absolute beast. It's so good, and it's aged really, really well. I'm still going to pick Maiden because it's Maiden, but man, I almost feel bad doing it because if the folks who are watching, if you've never heard that Angel Witch album, go listen to it like immediately after this show. It's really, really good. And Martin's absolutely correct. They came back and put out some newer music. God, it's been a while though. It's been 10 years, Martin, since that album came out.
Probably I think so. Well, there's been a couple
yeah,
at least,
2 of them, right?
Masterpieces. Yeah.
Yeah, both great. As if like there was no time in between. But yeah, that debut by Angel Witch is one of the greatest new wave of British heavy metal albums of all time. It's Maiden. I'm going to go with Maiden, but yeah, this is a close one.
Well, I'm going to refrain from this one because I don't have the familiarity with the Angel Witch record.
Gotcha.
So
well, you need to be listening to something after.
I got to be listening to some Angel Witch, so because I know the Maiden record, but I don't know the Angel Witch record. So there you go. But yeah, so I'm gonna refrain from that. Yeah. So my next picks, I'm putting Aerosmith Pump up against Motley Crue, Dr. Feelgood, which I know is Pete's favorite band. And the reason I'm putting these two together is they were both recorded at the same time in Vancouver at Clear Mountain Studios. The difference being that the Aerosmith record was Bruce Fairbairn and the Motley Crue record was Bob Rock. And, at this point, Motley Crue they were off the drugs and everything else, which explains why the songwriting, I think, on this record is really, really good. Still not my favorite Motley Crue record. It's probably my number 2. As far as sales, Dr. Feelgood did over 6 million worldwide. Pump did 8 million. 2 absolutely different records. When we did the Aerosmith show, I think I had Pump ranked rather high. But listening to it again in preparation for the show, oh man, it's nowhere near as good as I remembered it. There's just way too much shit going on. There's all these, additional instruments and effects on guitars. It's like everything's just kind of hitting you like a smorgasbord of just, it's just way too much going on. It's overproduced, man. The single Janie's Got a Gun, man, there's so much shit going on. Like, dude, strip that down. It's a good song. Don't clutter it with all this. And they had all these, instruments, dulcimers and castanets and whatever going on. And it really watered down everything on this record. There's some good rockers on this. Young Lust. Love in an Elevator is actually probably the best song on here. The other side's pretty good. I like that one. Hoodoo Voodoo Medicine Man. The ballad on here, What It Takes, is actually not bad. That one it's pretty good. But there's just too many effects. Even the guitars, they got all these, the solos and all this. It's all cluttered with processing, and it's terrible. Whereas the Dr. Feelgood record, with Bob Rock producing, the guitars sound fantastic on this. It's a straight up rock record. And man, Mick Mars, his playing on this and his parts, his tone, absolutely phenomenal. And it's got so many great songs on this. The title track is great. Rattlesnake Shake, Sticky Sweet, She Goes Down, Don't Go Away Mad, Just Go Away. I mean, it's just, to me, the straight up rock record, and Mick Mars playing, I mean, just absolutely annihilates Pump. I mean, it's not even close. Listening to them back to back, I'm listening to Pump and all this stuff going on. Then I put the Motley Crue on, and it's just like boom, 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 boom. It's got a little bit of, it is a little bit overproduced at times, but at the end of the day, it still sounds like a rock band. The guitars are hitting hard. The guitars sound great. The parts are great. Vince Neil, not one of my favorite singers, but still, I mean, he does the best that Vince Neil could possibly do. It's the best that he could possibly do on this record. And it's great. And it ranks probably as my number 2 favorite Motley Crue record. So there you go. Yeah, there's no compare. I was shocked. I'm like, wait a minute. I used to like Pump. What happened? It pumped out. But anyways, so I don't know. Is it even fair to ask Pete what's your favorite record of the two is?
I mean, I'll go on record again because I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think both of these albums suck, but so as you were talking, I'm going through the track list of both of them. I'm kind of like, I'm trying to find anything that I like on these albums. So Young Lust is a great song. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's all right.
Looking at the rest of this, oof, man. Fine is okay.
If I
love an elevator. Janie's Got a Gun. I never need to hear that ever again. I'm looking at the rest of this stuff. And I'm like, and then the Motley Crue. Honestly, I'm going to give it to Motley Crue only because Dr. Feelgood and Kickstart My Heart are kind of fun rockers. I don't mind those. The rest of this, I wouldn't say I like any of it. But because of those 2 songs, yes, you heard it here first, folks. I'm going to give the win to Motley Crue over Aerosmith in this one instance. But yeah, if I could never hear another thing from either of these 2 albums, I'd be okay with that. But got to pick one. I'll go with Motley Crue here.
When I was
the first Motley win on anything related to anything
ever, right? Done. Absolutely ever. Yep.
Yeah, funny.
Martin, you got an opinion on this?
I like both these albums a fair bit. Of course, Pete's probably getting sick of hearing me say this, but of course, I did a podcast episode of History in 5 Songs called "Go to Vancouver and Try Harder." Right.
There you go.
So all these bands that made the pilgrimage up there, and in many cases, they're going up there also to try get sober, get away from Los Angeles. So you get these 2 very ambitious albums, so both of them do try harder, and they do succeed because they try harder. This is maybe my 3rd favorite Motley album, but I'll give it to Pump. I do like most of Pump. I probably like 3/4 of it quite a lot. But I loved your analysis, Hack. I've never heard anybody really put it that way or spend that much time talking about the overproduction of this album, because I always, in my head, I think of it. I think of that starting with Get a Grip. But it really does start. Well, it starts on Permanent Vacation, actually, with all the extra little doodads all over the place, right? And you're right. The more of that stuff you add, it takes away from the other frequencies and stuff. You're not supposed to clutter these things up because now it's competing with everything else, right? Too much percussion and like you say, the stories about them having all these instruments at their disposal and trying to use them all and stuff. But yeah, I just feel I've always thought Aerosmith was, if I had to compare these 2 bands, one of them is kind of juvenile and one of them is kind of a more serious band. And I think Aerosmith tried twice as hard than Motley Crue did. But that's as far as Motley can take it. They're like a PG-13 adolescent sort of experience, and I think the Aerosmith is at least just a professional, a little bit deeper album. You get good literary wordplay out of Steven and stuff, and it's just much more ambitious. And I think when Aerosmith tries hard, I mean they do really try hard to write good songs, and even when they're overworked, you can appreciate the effort.
Yeah, I mean, lyric wise, there's no comparison. I mean, Aerosmith lyrics are a little more, mature, more well developed and whatever. I was actually reading about it, and one of the things they were saying was that Mick Mars' guitars when he was recording were so loud that they were bleeding into the studio that Aerosmith was working in, so they couldn't do vocals while Mick was doing his guitar stuff. But yeah, I mean, they had all this equipment, but I mean, the guitars on that record on Pump are just, I mean, there's got so much shit on them. Like, if they had done that record sort of, you know, I mean, my favorite Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic, kind of like just brought it back down to like a band, the songs would have been a lot better because there's just so much other stuff going, just cluttering. It's a lot of clutter. That's what it is. It's just a lot of clutter. You know?
Aerosmith never should. Aerosmith to me are not an artsy band. So when they try to get too artsy on, it doesn't work for me. It's like at their essence, they're like a garage band. That's the Aerosmith we want, right? Stripped back and dirty. So yeah.
I think that would have been a lot better. Yeah. All righty. What's your last two, Pete?
All right. I couldn't find one of my CDs, so I'm trying to remember how to do share an image. Hold on. Let me just bear with me a second, folks. So let me tell a little bit background. So both of these albums are from American bands. They're the third album for each, and they both were released in 1991. The first is, hopefully it pops up here. Hold on, I got to.
I got to bring it up.
You mean 1981?
There you go.
91.
Oh, 1981. I'm sorry, 81. So Earthshaker by Y&T. Okay, their third album, first album entering the 80s, and then the other band and their third album is Fire Down Under by Riot. Okay. In a weird way, both albums sound like a band entering a new decade, because I think both the first two albums from Y&T and the first two albums from Riot still have that 70s sound to them. And they both sound like, okay, we're entering a new decade. We got to do some different things. Both of these albums are, I would pretty much call metal albums. You could make the argument that both of these albums could be the best albums from both bands. And so, of course, on the Y&T album, we've got great tracks like Hungry for Rock and Dirty Girl, which is great. You know, Rescue Me is so good. It ends with like one of the great like heavy ballads of all time, and I Believe in You. It's a lot of the great songs on here. You got Dave Meniketti proving to be a great vocalist as well as a great guitar player. And then on this beast of an album, you've got so many anthems on here. It's got Swords and Tequila on here. You got the title track on here. Outlaw is so good. Alter the King. I mean, No Lies, Run for Your Life, one banger after another. And I think for Y&T, they kind of took the little bit of success that Earthshaker delivered, or it was a big successful album, but got a lot of people like interested in their music, and the next couple albums would be much bigger sellers. Unfortunately for these guys, all sorts of issues with label and management, and they never really quite topped the success of this one. And then they had a new singer. The singer left after this, you know, and unfortunately this was to be their like lone kind of bright spot in their catalog, full of great albums, but this was the only one that really had any bit of success. But I'm going to go, as much as I love Earthshaker, it's my favorite Y&T album, and I love Y&T. This is an amazing, amazing classic album, and I got to give the nod to Riot on this one.
Album probably would have done better if they had I don't know, what's their mascot or their logo or whatever.
Steel or whatever the hell his name is.
What the hell is that?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Come on.
Yeah, ridiculous. It's you know, I get you wanting to do like you know, Eddie, Iron Maiden had the whole Eddie thing. I get you want to do something like that, but not this, you know.
Something cool. Yeah.
And what's weird, it's like, you know, they kept it like consistent for a few albums where they would use this creature, and then like they did a whole bunch of albums without him, and then they brought him back again in recent years, which is kind of bizarre, you know. It's like, you know, they release, you know, stuff like this. He's nowhere to be found on here anyway. Or is he? Maybe he's hidden here. Oh, wait, there's a seal right there somewhere, but it's not the same guy. So yeah, it's just but what a great band. Weird career. I just got done reading Martin's book that he wrote a number of years ago, and man, so many lineup changes, so many different singers, and just no matter what record label they wound up on, it just couldn't break them for whatever reason. They were just not in the right place at the right time. But man, such a great catalog. There's so much good stuff no matter what era you're looking at from Riot. But yeah, The YNT catalog is great. I love that album, but Fire Down Under to me is it's an underrated heavy metal gem from the early years here in the States. And as Martin very rightly always puts it, and he talked about in his book, they were like almost like an honorary new wave of British heavy metal band, even though they were from New York here in the States. That's their sound was just fit perfectly in there. And I think a lot of the British bands kind of took them under their wing a little bit. So yeah, great album.
Yeah, no, I got to go with the Riot. There's some good stuff if you watch on YouTube, like really old footage of them playing with the original lineup. And yeah, I mean, they're just playing like it looks almost like a bar, like a real small theater. And man, they're just up there giving it their all, like, and yeah, like you said, that they didn't really go much beyond that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But
how weird is it? Their iconic vocalist, Guy Speranza, they got this album. They're finally starting to get a lot of attention. They got all these tours, and he's kind of like, yeah, this whole rock star thing, it's not really for me. And they're like, oh, right now you got to do this, right? After destroying all these years, crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. Martin, what's your pick between the two?
Well, I suppose I'm going to go with the Riot as well. I'll just put it in a little more perspective. I think I disagree with Pete a little bit. Like, I feel like there's a little more continuity between Narita and Fire Down Under than there is with the YNT situation, because the YNT situation, they're leaving their record label, London. They don't have any success with the Yesterday and Today album and the Struck Down album, 76, 78. There's this big gap of 3 years. They come back on A&M. And they put this album out. So their sound has changed quite a bit. So I think what YNT does, they put out this amazing album, but it's boomy and wild and exciting and Van Halen-esque. I mean, they were Van Halen-esque before anyways. But the Riot album is just this pristine, shiny, really tight, well played. Yeah. It's widely considered a classic. People don't really talk about Earthshaker in that same light. But Earthshaker is a great artistic achievement with a lot of humanity to it. Probably more humanity to it. More like blood, sweat, and tears kind of feel to it. More Van Halen, The Who, crazy chaoticness and personality than the Riot. But the Riot is almost considered like an AC/DC album of the new wave of British heavy metal. It's just really super disciplined and impressive. So I'll go with the Riot, but just by a little bit.
All right. What are your next two, Martin?
Okay, so I got a couple fun ones to close out here. I've got Coney Hatch, 1982, and Twisted Sister's second album, 1983, right? Yeah, 1983. So we've got a debut and the Twisted Sister, and the reason here's my Coney Hatch promo of the 4-song EP that they put out. But what I like about this choice is that both of these albums sound like, and I'm pretty sure both of the bands have said this, that Dee Snider definitely says this all the time, and I remember him saying this about how Twisted Sister was a cross between AC/DC and Judas Priest, and I think I've kind of heard the Coney Hatch guys say something similar. But what I like about both of these albums is that they are kind of like, well, they're both 83 and 82, so they're both kind of proto hair metal, right? But they're also they both have this intriguing heavy metal version of an AC/DC sound. The Twisted Sister is very straight lined and very disciplined, like I just said about the Riot. It's much less dynamic and more even keeled than the debut, Under the Blade. It's almost juvenile in a Motley Crue sort of way. In a Kiss way. I mean, they're almost like channeling, just really trying to be simple. So they've got a lot of that Kiss AC/DC simplicity and not really a lot of Judas Priest to it. Where on the other hand, the Coney Hatch is almost like a cross between a lot of AC/DC and there is some dense riffing, slightly technical things like the Judas Priest situation, but it's more like a cross between it's more like 75% ACD, well, let's say 50% AC/DC, 50% traditional heavy metal, and 50% kind of like melodic AOR, kind of putting a little bit of that into it as well, right?
Yeah, so, they got radio play.
Yeah, so I really like that both of them are like a modern, updated, slightly more complicated version of AC/DC, really. And if I was to choose one, the Coney Hatch, this has so much personality. It's such a cool concept that they put together for the sound here. And Twisted Sister, credit to them. Stay Hungry doesn't sound anything like this album either. This is like their most even keel. It's their animal magnetism, kind of like a Scorpions, not peaks and valleys, but everything's right through the middle, right, on that record. But yeah, just something about the personality, the coolness, the fact that it's a debut, it's Canadian. They kind of keep this sound they only made 3 albums, right, until Reunion.
Yeah.
But amazing songs on here. I just never get tired of this album. I play it all the time. So I'll go with the Coney Hatch.
The Coney Hatch, that was Kim Mitchell produced that record, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I love that record. Yeah. That was all over the radio when it came out. Yeah.
And both very mid-rangey with the production. Bare bones, nothing too heavy duty about the production. And the Coney Hatch is probably even a little dirtier and not as good as the production on this. But they both just really emphasize guitars.
Yeah. All right. Well, my pick is going to be Coney Hatch 100%. Yeah. Yourself, Pete?
I mean, I got Twisted Sisters from here, so they should be a very loved because everybody loves them around here. But I've never been much of a fan. I think the first album is pretty heavy, probably my favorite album of theirs. I'm not a huge fan of this album. I think the title track is great. There's a couple other tracks I really like. Coney Hatch, I'm actually fairly new to. I saw them live back in the day, never bought any of their records. I started getting into them just fairly recently. I like that debut quite a bit. It's simple, but the songs are memorable. The guitar riffs are cool. And I like the fact that there is sort of like an AC/DC thing going on there too, but they are also a very good, just melodic rock band, in addition to some of the metal influences. So I'm going to give the nod to Coney Hatch on this one.
Yeah, a lot of hooks in their songs, right? Like they're very memorable, very hooky songs. Yeah. Yeah, Coney Hatch is awesome. And they're local. So, but that's not why I picked them.
That's okay.
They're from Toronto. All righty. So for my last two, I'm pitting. I gotta go with a Kiss record. Gotta go Destroyer and Alice Cooper.
Oof.
Right. The common denominator here is Mr. Bob Ezrin.
Yep.
So he produced the Destroyer record. He started producing it the same year as the Welcome to My Nightmare came out, and he's got his fingerprints all over both of these records. He's got songwriting credits all over the place. Another thing they share in common, which I didn't know until I looked at it, is there's 2 songs on there by Hollywood Stars, which is Kim Fowley's band, his old band. He wrote Escape on the Alice Cooper record and King of the Nighttime World. That I knew on the Destroyer record. But I mean, they got Bob Ezrin all over it. It's got that whole classical vibe thing, lots of orchestration. And as far as record sales, Destroyer lost what I could pick up, what I discovered, over 2 million. Alice sold 3 million. So the Welcome to My Nightmare record, I listened to it again. I hadn't listened to it in years. I always love the record. A good portion of it almost sounds like a soundtrack, to like his show, right? Like the title cut, the Black Widow, years ago, Stephen, The Awakening. By the way, that sort of years ago, Stephen and The Awakening, that sort of trilogy of songs is absolutely freaking brilliant. It is phenomenal. Like just holy shit. Like, yeah. And then, but mixed in, sort of sprinkled in there, he's got his rockers, Department of Youth, Cold Ethel, that we talked about on another show about, silly lyrics and such, and Escape. So it's got the rockers in there. It's a really cinematic record, but again, that's Bob Ezrin, right? The whole thing with top-notch musicians. He's got, Dick Wagner on it. He's got, Steve Hunter. It's an epic album. It's Alice's first solo record, if you want to call it that. And it really develops his character, So it is a really, really good record. And then you've got Destroyer, right? So Destroyer, I mean, I know what Kiss was thinking. It's like, hey, I want a little bit of that. I want a little bit of that sort of more cinematic, epic thing. I want a record that's going to define some of the characters, in Kiss, and you've got, the God of Thunder. That's the Gene song, and it's always been the Gene song, and then the Paul song, Do You Love Me? You got the classical influences from Bob, Great Expectations. I mean, he's pilfering some classical pieces. Now, I don't know classical music, but when I hear something that's, I kind of heard that, that's kind of familiar. So he does a little bit of that with Great Expectations, and he does it again with Beth. You got Dick Wagner doing the solo on Sweet Pain because Ace was having a card game or something, and then of course he's got so he with Kiss, he's basically, I mean, he's got top-notch musicians when he's doing the Welcome to the Nightmare record. And then he's got Kiss. Okay. So he's teaching these guys like music theory. He's blowing his whistle. This is how you do this, how you do that. All the drum parts. He had to teach Peter how to play the drum parts. And there's a famous story of him, even Peter's meter was off and he was tapping like a cigar box, as a sort of, click track, before click tracks and kind of getting Peter to stay on time. But, Peter's drumming on this, by far his most technical drumming is on this record. And also on this record, it's the first time Kiss ever used outside people, the outside musicians, and, that Bob played on a lot of stuff as well, played a lot of piano. And the piano was really nice on this because Bob was doing a lot of like piano under the guitar and make the guitars kind of sound a little more full and rich. He brought the choir in for, Great Expectations. But so when you're comparing the two records, man, it's really, really close, right? Like the problem with Destroyer is it's got probably a lot of the most overheard Kiss songs, right? Shout It Out Loud is on there. Heard that a million times. Detroit Rock City, you've heard a million times. God of Thunder, you heard a million. I mean, especially if you've gone to shows, because those songs are always part of the set list, right? You've heard them a million times. But when you compare them song by song, you know what? I got to give it to the Alice Cooper record, okay? And just based on Steven, or years ago, Steven and the Awakening, those three, they just give me, man, I had like just chills down my spine again, because every time, especially Steven, it's like, holy shit. It's just the best music. It's like, it's got that whole 70s, when I was a kid, man, I remember watching Welcome to My Nightmare, the concert on Channel 79, and then they'd show Phantom of the Paradise and that whole 70s gothic thing that I absolutely, as a kid, loved. And then, of course, that's why I turned into a Kiss fan. But it's got that whole vibe, and it's just so cinematic and just gorgeous, like brilliant, absolutely brilliant. If no one's listened to Welcome to My Nightmare, just listen to those three songs. In succession, unfreaking believable. So yeah, I gotta give. Yes, I'm a Kiss fan, but I gotta tip my hat to Welcome to My Nightmare. It's just unbelievable. Yeah. Alrighty, Pete, what do you got? What's your pick between the two? Man, it's tough, eh?
It's really tough.
Yeah.
If you would have asked me this 45, 40, 30 years ago, I would have been like, it's Destroyer, right? There's no brainer. Yeah. Now it's a lot closer, I think, for me, because I'll be honest, I very rarely listen to Destroyer anymore. I still listen to Kiss, but this is an album I very rarely play anymore because I played it to death back in the day. And yeah, you're right. There's like there's certain songs on here we've heard a million times already because the band always plays them live and it's what they play on the radio, blah, 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 blah. But it's a great album. It's a great sounding album. It's very different for them at the time, right? This production compared to what they released before.
Oh, like leaps and bounds. Right?
Yeah. There's classics on here. Detroit Rock City, God of Thunder. I mean, Flamin' Youth, Shout It Out Loud. Beth, God, I never need to hear Beth again. But it's great stuff on here. But man, that Alice album, the title track is great. Devil's Food is so good. I think The Black Widow is one of my favorite Alice Cooper songs. It's so good. Only Women Bleed. I can do without that. But man,
I love that one. That's one of my favorites. I love that.
Yeah, it's a good ballad, but I'm like, I don't know. Side 2 though is amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely amazing. I mean, Department of Youth is a great rocker. Cold Ethel years ago, Steven, classic stuff. Can I pull a Catino and say I'm gonna give this a tie because I don't want to give an answer because I'll change my mind like 10 minutes later. I don't know. I honestly, everything in me is telling me to pick Alice Cooper here, even though, you know, Kiss is my band from way back. It's a great album, and it's not even my favorite Alice Cooper album. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like they're like 3 albums that came out before this that I think are way better than this. And that tells you something right there. So yeah, I'm gonna pick Alice today, but I might change my mind.
You know, if you ask me tomorrow, I might go because with Destroyer, what I really like, Sweet Pain, all the deep cuts. Sweet Pain is amazing.
Yeah.
Flaming Youth is amazing. I don't know. I always love Great Expectations for whatever reason.
It's gorgeous.
I mean, it's like, talk about ego. Listen to Gene, when you see what my hands can do.
Yeah.
You know? But it's such a beautiful song. I mean, yeah, those ones really kind of, but there's more on the Alice, you know, like that trilogy of songs that I mentioned. And I always loved Cold Ethel and Escape. And
Cold Ethel is great. Yeah.
You know, so there you go. What about you, Martin?
Nice. Well, you know, I again, back to the podcast, History in 5 Songs. One of my favorite episodes was called Crazy Ideas. And I think I talked about this in there, but I know generally I talked about this and Pete's heard me say this many times. While these singers are alive, sing the phone book, get out there and do some wacky stuff. I would love to see Bob Ezrin take these 2 albums, wipe the vocals off of them, and put all 4 Kiss singers on the Welcome to My Nightmare album with some new lyrics they wrote, and take Alice and have him write some new lyrics and put some vocals on Destroyer and release it as a double concept album and mix the songs up and everything, because these are such of a great study together, and it's really cool that you put them together. And yeah, Bob Ezrin does a lot of ear candy and stuff all over him. Welcome to My Nightmare is my favorite Alice Cooper album. Destroyer is my favorite Kiss album. I love both of them. And you know, you just reminded me, it's kind of cool. I've never really thought about it this way, and this is a cool thing about pairing these albums. I think I like all the mellow stuff on the Alice Cooper album better than any of the mellow stuff on the Kiss album.
Oh, definitely.
I feel like the heavy stuff on the Kiss album is more sincere, because the one thing that bothers me a little bit about the heavy stuff on the Alice Cooper is it really sounds like a bunch of studio guys whose heads aren't wired to think in heavy terms, right? It's like, you guys, none of you guys like or know anything about heavy metal, but write the heaviest metal you can. And so what they come up with is those songs, which I love those songs, but it just feels like a little bit studio session-y.
Do you think, Martin, if we had the original Alice Cooper group playing on that album, the results would be a little bit different?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you'd get all the personality would come flowing back, because that's kind of what it's missing. It's missing that personality, right? You got Alice's personality, you've got Bob, you know, abstractly, but yeah, man, Bob, go in, make a double album, redo all the vocals with all the Kiss guys in there and Alice swapping places, and that'd be amazing to hear.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite?
Oh, okay. So I'll go with the Kiss. I think just barely I'll go with the Kiss.
Barely. I know it's pretty tight. It's pretty tight between the two. Yeah. All right. Well, Pete, you got anything you want to mention coming up on the channel?
Tune in tomorrow morning at Friday Morning at the Funhouse, where Martin and I will be talking about Mr. Ted Templeman and our 10 favorite productions from him. So our 10 favorite albums featuring the production.
It was 5 each, I hope. We were doing 5 each.
Were we doing 5 each? Okay. Yeah. I picked 10, but I can whittle it down to 5. That's fine. Yeah, whatever. So
I made all my notes already.
10 in total. All right. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking all about Ted Templeman and, you know, which are our favorite albums featuring his production and why we like those productions so much. That's coming up. And this probably will instigate a whole series talking about notable producers and some of our favorite records that they produced and so on. So that's coming up tomorrow morning. So stay tuned.
You can do Ezra next. Yeah.
Exactly.
Martin? Yeah. Martin, what about yourself?
Well, let's see. My sweet book got reissued. So at martinpopoff.com, I've written a pile of rock books, but yeah, sweet Blockbuster, Blockbuster, the Sweet Story, and Peach ordered one from me. Thank you very much. But coming up soon is this bad boy here. This is the Hallowed by Their Name, the Iron Maiden book, right? So this is the
Bible, dude.
Oh yeah,
I think it's massive.
So I get this this comes out on my birthday, which is also the day of the Canadian election, April 28th. And it is a massive, massive Iron Maiden book. This is the Beast edition. That's 250 retail. But I'll show you so that's coming out. It's 666 pages, full color throughout. This is what the normal one looks like. This is 60 retail in the States and 90 in Canada, but that's coming out soon. And then a few weeks later, I get Guns N' Roses at 40, which is through Motor Books, and that's a coffee table book as well. I've got my History in 5 Songs podcast, our Kicked in the Teeth podcast. Of course, we've got the Contrarians channel where I got those 2 series going that I'm doing a lot on, the Reliving Old Reviews and the Who Invented Heavy Metal.
Yeah, I've been watching the Who Invented Heavy Metal. The links for both Pete's channel and Martin's channel are below, by the way. So, folks, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I'm slowly approaching 5,000 subscribers. I would much appreciate you subscribing. That would be awesome. Please hit the like. And we do this once a month with these gentlemen, and we will see you next month, guys. Hang out and have a great rest of your week. Take care. Cheers.
Thanks, folks.
Bye-bye.